Amy, Sue, welcome to the podcast. So glad you're here.
Thanks for having us.
You bet. We're going to have a little bit of back and forth with with the two guests today, but I think we're all up for the challenge. So for my audience, just to kind of tee up this topic of why is Mike doing an episode on parental leave? As I've talked about before, I'm a father of three. Two of my kids have birthdays this week, so shout out to Graham and Cole.
Awesome.
We're going to be 10 and 5. And my wife and I run a 2-income household. So we've had an evolution of kind of dealing with parental leave. And I would say my views on the topic have changed, going from, 0 kids and not thinking it mattered to by the end of by the time I had 3, it was like, wow, this is really sacred time, to have with my kids and yeah, what is work going to be like when I come back and all of those kinds of things. So that's why I wanted to have this discussion today, because again, our podcast here is all about taking control and really trying to get a good work-life balance. So ladies, I really appreciate that you're here. I guess I want to start off right off the bat. Amy, if you could maybe start and talk to us a little bit about how you got into the work that you do today.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. I'm just struck by something you've said, so I'm going to.
Sure, yeah.
This idea of sacred time and that transition that you go through from being that not parent, that worker, to becoming a parent of 3. I'm a parent of 2, as is Sue. So I feel like I want to be interviewing you right now, but I started this when at 15 years ago, I was on the other side of this. I was living in New York. I was working on my doctorate. I was consulting to some of the biggest brands in the country around work-life balance and women's leadership and women's economic advancement. And I didn't have any children. I just had seen this as a barrier to women's career success and wanted to work on it. And then I had also been told that I could never have children. So that was it was later in my career, and I all of a sudden was going to be a mom. And it was really, really exciting. But I also didn't realize, and imagine 15 years ago, this wasn't really talked about. People went away on leave, they came back, they were supposed to be the same person and fit right back in and carry on. And so I set myself up for a 3-week leave, which I thought was plenty long. And I was the primary breadwinner in my family. And, it was my first time. Plus, I was this recognized expert in this topic, right? Like, I thought I knew what I was doing. And then I had my first son, and I was completely knocked over by the experience of it. And I had an interesting moment after the fact where all of the things that I had been working on in my career, I had just finished creating this first executive coaching curriculum that Columbia University had to teach about what executive coaching is. I was doing work-life consulting. I was working on leadership issues, and then I had a child, and it was like this awareness that we had been overlooking the most important moment in a new parent, whether at the time I was focused on women, but whatever their gender identity, in their career and personal life cycle, that personal and professional time frame. And so I changed the focus of my research and my work to try and create a field to support that time within our companies and individually. So that's a long answer to your question, but I think it's important for people to think about how far we've come in 15 years, as well as that transition from being on one side of being a parent to being on the other, and realizing, oh, there's a lot in here. There's a lot that we can really use.
Yeah, I think it's something you don't necessarily get until you experience it, because there's so many different things going on, right? It's not just the time, it's the emotional roller coaster. It's feeling inadequate because you don't know what to do, like how to take care of this life and all those kinds of things. So yeah, it's a
Absolutely.
very, I think that for me, it's such a very unique and powerful time. And
Mhm.
I think it's very clear that, yeah, 3 weeks isn't enough to get it done. It's just not cutting it. And I'm, of course, speaking from the kind of the father role and all
Mhm.
that. So, I
But
mean,
Mike,
go ahead.
what you said, this idea that you're talking about of the sacred time and this unique and powerful time, that's what I experienced in that moment. I was really struggling. I was having postpartum depression. I wasn't sure how to take care of this little human. It was, it was such a mess. But what ended up coming from that time was that creativity. I literally invented a new field in this country because of that time. And I think that so many people have a similar experience where something comes to them that connects with their heart or their purpose or their new path. And because we haven't created a world where we're allowed to explore that and bring it back, it doesn't get to come and impact everyone and help everyone. And so that is one of the goals in this work, is to make space for that, whether that's to go back into your company and your job that you're currently in, or to pivot into a new career, or some version of both.
Yeah. So for the audience members who maybe don't have kids or are on the cusp of maybe having their first child, can you try to just explain, like, what is the big problem with parental leave right now? Let's just take the US. Why should we care?
Why
What
should
are
we
the
care?
downstream effects? Like, what are you likely to experience if you haven't been through that, I guess?
Yeah, I can start, but Sue, I want you to jump in here. The biggest problem is we don't have a consistent paid leave policy in this country, right? There's a lack of paid leave, but I also want your listeners to understand the difference between a paid leave policy and then the practice that puts that policy into effect. So right now we have 9 states plus DC in this country that have some sort of paid leave policy. That means those states have a mandate. All the companies within them have to provide a paid leave program. It's usually an insurance type program like Social Security that the company and the individual pay a little bit into, and then they get 6 to 12 weeks of paid leave. And what that does is it allows time to heal, to bond, to form your new family, spend time in that wonderful moment, and then be able then to go back to work in a way that is a little more healthy, right? And so that is one of the biggest problems in this country. So this inconsistency creates problems for companies. If you're a multi-state employer, or you just want to be doing good in other parts of the country that don't have a paid leave program, that is on your shoulders to provide solely. So right now we're in the infrastructure bill, there is a policy program. It is the most bipartisan program that we see. 75% of swing state participants across the aisle support having a paid leave program. This is like one of the few things our country can agree on. And Sue, you want to pop in? I feel you could really add to this.
Well, it's something that has been on the cusp of happening for a long time, and a lot of different policy groups have been working toward it. One other thing I want to point out is the difference between FEMLA, which, everybody in theory, it's the law of the land, it's the federal policy we do have. For one thing, FEMLA is completely unpaid. And the second part is FEMLA only applies to about, I can't remember the exact
46.
stat, 50% of the population, because of the restrictions around it, right? Employer of a certain size, certain number of employees. So this has really been an egregious oversight in our social safety net in this country for a very, very long time. And we're on the brink of solving it. And one of the things that I really admired about when I came in and started working with Amy about 7-8 years ago was that she could already see beyond that. She's like, paid leave's going to happen one way or another. This can't go on. We're going to get paid leave. But what's going to happen when companies actually have to start implementing it? What's the practice need to look like so that people aren't, subtly penalized, right? Or unconsciously penalized for taking advantage of the policy. So what we focus on and what the book really focuses on is how do you create that practice of your leave experience within this broken system that allows you to have as successful a leave as possible and have that sacred time with your family and not jeopardize your career in the process.
So speaking to the parent, speaking to what they can do in terms of taking control of that and what's their part in it, not just leaving it up to the company or the state,
exactly,
or whatever to
and when I had my first child about 14 years ago, I was waiting for everyone to tell me what to do and what was going to happen, and it was very patchwork and piecemeal, and nobody had a cohesive plan that they could hand to me, right? And I was a little bit flabbergasted by that, and therefore was very reactive, right? At every point, I was reacting to something about the situation. And, I know this is something you advocate for regularly, Mike, but you need to lead your own leave experience. And I met Amy shortly before I got pregnant with my second child, and my second leave experience was very, very different as a result of that. Because I understood, okay, nobody's going to do this for me. If I actually want to have, an experience that aligns with my values and creates the kind of time that I want, I need to set it up. And I need to set it up in a way that other people actually are like, follow my lead and feel the confidence that I have about the ability to get through it all. And that really, really goes a long way.
So let's dive into that a little bit, because again, we talk, and we can come back to policy and paid leave, but it's not just about paid leave. It's
right.
One of the two of you, I forget which one, said, subtly penalized. Like, what are the things, I guess I'm curious to look, what are the things that are happening, or what are the things that you have to take control of in this moment, because really nobody else is gonna take control of them for you? What are those things that, or maybe give some examples?
All of it. But you start, right? I think, to Sue's point, people today still think they're still blindsided by the fact they don't have paid leave, that it is, maybe they have family, and they're blindsided that nobody's telling them what to do and that there isn't a clear process. There's very few companies in this country that have that, and they're the bigger ones who've had to. They may work in other countries, and they've learned how to do that well over there. But here in the US, from start to finish, it's on you. And the goal here is to make sure it's on you in collaboration with your company, because that's what's going to set you up for success long term. What we're trying to do is use the process as a way to improve your career, improve your job, improve your experience as an employee and as a parent. And so that starts with our first A, we call them 10 A's, but the touch points in our framework. And these are really the things that over the many years, 15 years I've been doing this, the touch points are all of the pieces that everyone has to go through in their transition. They're the commonalities that everyone touches in some format. And so however you interact with those has a negative or positive experience on your transition, can send you one way or another. And then your own personal individual experience is sort of the, I don't know what to call it, the fluffing in the pillow. That's all the pieces that you makes this your unique time. So it's completely individual, but it does have these touch points that everyone navigates through. So the first one is announcement, right? So that's right at the beginning. How you as a new parent makes that announcement and enters into that space with your company around this topic sets the tone for the entire 3-phase transition. So if you come in and you're apologetic and you're like, oh, I'm sorry, I know this is a horrible time, I wish this didn't happen, whatever it is, that is not setting a tone that you want to set for your leave experience. If you rather go in and say, I'm so excited, I'm going to be welcoming this child into my family and our lives, and this is what I'm thinking to do. Can we set up a time to talk about it more and make a plan, et cetera, et cetera. That sets a very different tone. On the flip side, there's a responsibility from the organization to also know how they respond in each of these touch points. So for this example, if that manager then says, oh no, this is horrible, what are we going to do? Or, oh, you're fired, worst case scenario, then that's not a good response. So we know what makes a good response, what makes a good way of doing this. I've been, doing this for a long time. So if that new manager instead says, oh, I'm so excited for you, I know it's a tricky time right now, but we've got this. There's a area of our website that has all these things. Let's sit down and have our meeting. We have these forms. There's this, I'm going to hold your hand through this. It's not going to be a problem. We're going to use it as an opportunity to grow the team. That's sending a different message. So that's sort of each of our touch points have that.
Sure. So there's a huge communication element around this, right? Tricky topic, both sides, not clear guidelines on how this is all supposed to happen. So
and everyone's scared, right? Everyone's scared. That manager is terrified. He's going to start he or she's going to start a lawsuit, gender discrimination, pregnancy discrimination lawsuit, say the wrong thing. At the very least, just step in it and be embarrassed, right? And that new parent's worried they're going to get fired, or they're going to
lose opportunities for advancement, or
So Sue, is there an opportunity, and maybe this is a cornerstone of the book, but in terms of guiding parents on what they should ask for, what's realistic to ask for in this dialogue, since there aren't really concrete guidelines? I guess that's especially probably in a small business setting. Larger companies probably have a little bit more guidance on what their policy is.
So it's a great question. And the second A that we're talking about is kind of where you set yourself up to figure that out for yourself. So the second A is assess. So you have to take a look from every single angle of your situation. What are you facing? What is your situation at work? What are your relationships like with your manager and leadership and your teammates? What strategies do you bring that have, served you well in the past that you can bring now to this situation? What are the potential sabotages, right? What are the really tricky things that are going on right now that this is only going to, really throw a wrench in things? Once you do that assessment, and you align it with your values and what you want to get out of the experience, then you're set up for the third A, which is to make that action plan. And the action plan is where you get to decide not just how you're going to hand off your work, but what you're going to ask for in terms of flexibility when you come back, right? Do you want an intermittent return? A lot of dads, for example, want some time initially, right, when the child arrives, and then they want to come back to work. And then when their partner goes back to work, they may want to take more time off, right? So think in terms of what is going to set you up well and feed you not just practically, but emotionally. And then you frame it. And it's just like any other ask at work. If you're coming, instead of dropping all of your problems at your manager's feet, right, you bring the solution, right? If you bring the plan, it makes it very easy for them to say yes, especially because managers are not trained on how to handle anything related to parental leave by and large, right? I would say, 98% of companies, managers don't know what to do. So if you come to them with a plan that not just meets your needs, but also meets the organization's needs, they're going to have a very easy time saying yes to you. Of course, not in all cases. We don't have completely rose-colored glasses. We know some environments are very toxic and others are just have room for flexibility, and people just want to do the right thing, but they don't have time or they don't have the tools. So if you are doing the legwork of bringing a plan that will work for everyone and presenting it as, hey, this is actually an opportunity for Sam to get trained in this thing that he's been wanting to learn. Or this is an opportunity for our team to really tighten up the way it communicates and we pass this information, right? Present the opportunities and work your own solutions in there so that you get what you need to.
And it's really hard to think ahead into these situations if you haven't been there before. So the book and the guideline and the roadmap is very helpful and timely, I would assume.
Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
Oh, I was just going to say, and we ask these questions in there with each of these. What do you want to be asking yourself? What are your reflection questions? What are your, we have exercises. What's your values exercise? How do you want to set your boundaries? What are your what type of boundary management techniques do you want to use? You know, the idea of the book is that you have a coach in your hand for everybody in this country, because right now coaching is expensive. It's hard to come by. It's not easily accessible. We're working on that, getting it widely accessible to everyone. But for now, this is what we're working with. So we hope that's how it comes out for folks.
Right. And Mike, as I'm sure you and your wife learned, like your personal growth and your personal development when you become a parent is just like through the roof, right? You grow in ways you never even knew you needed to grow. And it happens in a very short amount of time. Your priorities crystallize. You become just wicked efficient at absolutely everything you do. There are so many things that happen that could benefit your workplace if there's that trust established, if there is that understanding, right, between you and your manager and you and your team, that this is actually going to be a gift in many, many ways to everyone.
Yeah.
But you have to set that relationship expectation up at the beginning of it.
I have a quick story that kind of plays into this. So I'm on the board of a really small kind of, growing company. They're trying to get their legs under them here in town. And the CEO came to me and said, hey, like I have this, one of my employees is going to be, taking parental leave at some point, and we don't really have a policy. I said, well, what do you want to do? And he does a little research, comes back to me with like the bare minimum FEMLA, guidance. And I said, okay, but you have to realize that in this person who is a woman, you are literally building one of the most efficient people on planet Earth. Once they have this, have this baby, I said it from that standpoint. I was like, you can't, it makes dollars and cents right now when it feels like you're pinching pennies, but like, you don't want to be, you don't want to be known for doing the bare minimum, and the bare minimum is not enough anyway.
Yep.
But what you get out of it is like really, when you treat somebody right, loyalty and just an absolute productive machine, to be callous about it. Like it's just true. And so, he ended up kind of like going back and having more of a dialogue instead of saying, okay, here's our policy, I'm going to set it. Like they've worked it out. And I think overall it's been a positive experience for both of them. So
thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing that, Mike.
Go ahead.
With the background in leadership development, I used to do executive development, leadership development programs. And it's sort of a pun, and now I'm embarrassed to say it, but I really think of it as the mother of all experiential learning programs, right? You can't, this time frame and this experience is happening anyway. And if you can think of it that way, the way I see new parents grow during this time frame, I never saw once in the 10 years I was doing leadership development programs. I mean, it's so incredibly powerful. And we do take that perspective throughout the book. The first chapter, one of the things we're asking you to think of yourself as a leader, and then in each A, we're pointing out which leadership development skills you're honing during that A. So there is that framework too. The other thing you're making me think about is I don't know what made me think of it, this boss maybe. When men take leave, it has each month of leave that a man takes has a 7% increase in that women's pay, in women's pay. So the more the men take leave, the more money women make. And that, I think, speaks to the importance of this being a gender neutral policy within companies and treating it equally that way. This is one of the places it gets so tricky in our country and actually everywhere in the world because of the biological nature of birth and breastfeeding and, just all of those practical pieces. But for women to actually not be penalized, to your question to Sue, that's going to stop happening when men are taking it in equal numbers for the same length of time.
Mhm.
When it just becomes the way we do it, right?
Sure. Yeah, very interesting. I was going to ask a little bit more about maybe the disparities and what are, so we talked about pay a little bit, but I mean, what are some of the data or some of the key points about how, just in terms of the difference between maybe a husband taking time and the mother taking time? How are those things affecting people differently, I guess?
Sue, you want to?
Sure. So there's something called the Fatherhood Bonus, right? So generally when men announce that they're welcoming a child, their workplace culture responds by saying, oh, well, then you're going to need a promotion or a raise because you're the breadwinner and you need to support a family now. And then there is a motherhood penalty where a woman announces the same thing. And it's like, oh, well, you're no longer going to be a totally dedicated employee, right? Now you're going to have this divided attention, et cetera, et cetera. So on a cultural response level, we see a lot of impact in advancement. Of course, we know that women who become mothers, a lot of them end up leaving the workforce, at least for a period of time. Part of that is because we don't have a paid leave policy. Part of that is because we don't have good childcare. And part of that is because men make more. So when a couple is looking at the decision of who's going to keep working and who's going to stay home, they stay with the bigger paycheck. So it's this cycle that keeps, deepening because of the way our culture is set up.
Got it.
Yeah.
I wanted to get into, so the last 18 months has been really interesting. We have, obviously, right? We have gone fully remote. And now we have sort of this big concept or idea of the Great Resignation and a labor shortage. How are you seeing this issue of parental leave and policy playing out in that context? Is this something that is mothers, fathers are leaving jobs to stay at home more, or is it something more along the lines of, we like remote's like net positive for working parents, right? Like what are you seeing from this?
I think it's a mixed bag and it has changed through this 18 months. Women are being more negatively impacted than men overall. We have, I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but it's a significant amount of women are being forced out of the workforce above men, and that is for caregiving duties. And so there's that. We are seeing some real positives when we talk about the parental leave timeframe. We have people are now we've been doing this long enough that we have people who are becoming pregnant while working from home, not having their, not showing anything because they're from here down in the video, right? And having children and going on leave while still being at home and then going back from leave while still working from home. So, there's a lot to navigate there, and it is happening differently for different people. I heard somebody say this week, and I can't remember where I saw it. I'm going to have to figure that out. But they were using the term, rather than the Great Resignation, the Great Reinvention. And I really appreciated that because that's what's happening. We talk about parental leave as a transition over time, but right now our country is in a massive transition as well. And I was very hopeful in the beginning of this that we would seize the opportunity in the same way I encourage people to seize the chaos of parental leave to choose how you want it to set out, how you want it to go. but that has largely not happened. In many ways, we're going back to what it was, and we're just going to perpetuate some of the same problems that we have in the past. But in other places, we're really learning from it. So we've had a window into people's home lives in a much different way. And I think that's allowed a lot of people to become more authentic in their work, bring themselves to it more. And they're saying, to your point, like, this is a net positive. I don't want to lose this. And so the companies that are able to figure that out, how to keep that and how to support that, will be the ones that survive in this next phase of this great reinvention.
Do you have a couple examples of like forward-thinking companies? Who's on the cutting edge of this issue in terms of what you guys are really looking for?
Do you have anyone in mind, Sue? I'm thinking of, but I'm blanking on his name. I'm the worst when it comes to names and dates.
What we generally see is the tech sector, the startups are really good at pivoting and being flexible. A lot of them are already distributed teams. They don't have a base office anyway. So they're like, yeah, this is the way we've always done business. And then we see them evolving their parental leave policies when their young team starts to get into that childbearing age. And then they're the ones who come up with those really forward-thinking policies. There is such a, talent fight in that sector that they're always looking for the way that they can retain the talent that they already have. Right. So I think tech's leading the way on a lot of these issues. And you can see some of the older, more entrenched tech firms are like, no, everybody needs to get their tail back to the office, right? Or we're going to dock your pay and all these things. And I don't think that is going to fly long term. We're only seeing more and more opportunities for people to join remote teams or start up their own thing. I'm really excited because I think a lot of the women who have left the traditional workforce are going to start up their own thing on their own terms that meets their family flexibility needs. Or when they're going back into the workforce and we're going to need them, right? Companies are going to be trying to get these women back. They're going to demand certain things, right? More workplace flexibility, more time off, paid parental leave, right? I think things will shift in a dramatic way as a result of this, and it will be to the benefit of working families.
Interesting.
We are,
but it's going to be tough on the way there. It's going to be tough.
It's going to be tough. I won't name the bank's names, but I had an interesting conversation with some people in New York recently, and there's 3 different major banks, and they're all handling the return to work differently. One is very much like, everybody in right now, that's it, we're going back to the way it was. The other one is like, okay, we'll do a little bit of flex. And the other one, run by a woman CEO, is fully embracing a new way of working. And the chatter is everyone wants to go there, right? Like, that's where they're, so just as a little microcosm of what we'll be seeing on a bigger scale around the country. I think anytime people have, it's eye-opening, right? Like, this has been an eye-opening time, and really a value centering time. What matters, what's important to me, life is short. And I think that any of the companies that are open to understanding the human at the center of their workforce and supporting that human are going to be the ones that succeed.
Yes, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I had a couple gentlemen on last week. They're company culture people and have a new book out, and the center of their whole thesis and approach is respect. And this plays right into that, right?
Yeah.
When you
Just
understand
respect.
When you understand the human, you have empathy for that human, and you develop a respect, and you treat them as a human, and that's what comes through ultimately in culture. And obviously parental leave is a great part of this. So just to bring back to the policy level before I let you go, we're driving at this. I think at the beginning we were kind of saying we're driving at this paid leave policy. It's very bipartisan. What's needed right now to get that over the finish line in a satisfactory way that isn't just necessarily about how much we pay people, but it's like holistic to cover the issue.
Thanks for asking that, Mike. I think what people need to know is when FMLA was passed 30-ish years ago, it was the compromise that was made was that it would not be funded, that it was an unpaid job protection program. And so we have been dealing with the aftermath of that for 30 years. And so what we're looking at now with this infrastructure bill is a way to remedy that. And so the minimum, in order to not make every company have to jump through 50 other hoops, because the minimum of 12 weeks leave needs to happen. That then aligns with other states, it aligns with FEMLA, it aligns with the way we think about that. That is a basement floor of amount of time it takes to do this well as a family. So that's one thing. We need it to be gender neutral, to the reasons I was saying before, in order to have it make an impact on some of those longer term issues, women falling out of, being forced out of the workforce, losing out on Social Security, losing out, all of those kind of issues that compounded from that. And we need it to be flexible, and it needs to be the same for everyone. So that's a policy piece. What I would ask of your listeners right now is, we are at this moment where that policy that was presented as 12 weeks is being whittled away because of more compromising, because of budget. And that's understandable. Of course, it's an enormous, there's a whole mess of stuff that's happening, but this one really is a bipartisan issue that everyone benefits from. Because when we talk about a paid leave bill, and a paid leave insurance program in the United States, it's not just for parental leave. It's also to care for a sick loved one or yourself recovering from cancer, or things like that. So don't think, oh, I'm not a parent, this doesn't apply to me. It absolutely applies to you. It's what may save you from being forced out of work altogether, or going bankrupt. So if people go to paidleaveforall.org, there's a form there where it finds your senators and Congress people, and you can write them immediately. But if you do nothing, if this is something you believe in and are compelled by, making that call this week, next week, right now, is a really genuinely impactful thing that you can do. I don't know if that helps answer your question, but I love to get that plug in there.
Yeah, no, yeah. Perfect. So the book, the Parental Leave Playbook, is really a culmination of a lot of your work and research over the last many years. It's currently out?
Yeah, it just came out. It just came out. It's live in the world. Yeah.
Excellent. There it is. Look at that.
I want to hold it up too, Sue. I don't know if anyone sees this.
Nice. What else would you like? Anything else you would like to leave the audience with about that book and your work, and anything else?
So will you tell about, we have a whole because there's so much that is needed that builds around this, and because the publisher was going to murder me if I did more than 300 pages, right? Like, they're like, enough already. We also made the decision to make a lot of the resources that we use with our client companies available to anyone who has the book. So we've created this whole webpage where we have the action plans, we have the checklists, we have reflection workbooks, and for managers, for new moms, dads, we have values exercises. There's a whole host of things on that come with the book. So it really is intended to be a full experience. And of course, we're here to help if anyone needs that also. We do. CPLL is the only, Center for Parental Leave Leadership is the only consultancy is the first consultancy in the country to focus on parental leave exclusively. So we've been around for 8 years. So we've done everything from policy to creating the first evidence-based coaching practice, all of these different things. If you're doing anything around parental leave, call us, we will help you. But Sue knows all the where to get the book.
Yeah, you can get the book anywhere books are sold. If you just want to look at more of the details, you can go to cplleadership.com/book. And then, of course, once you buy the book inside, you'll get a link to all of those other downloadable resources that will help you plan your leave.
Okay, great. And for our audience, we'll have all these links in the show notes, plenty of information on the Center for Parental Leave Leadership, the book, and any other mentions that were made here today. So we'll have all of that in the show notes when the show comes out. Amy, Sue, thanks so much for being here. I learned a lot. I really appreciate the work that you ladies are doing. And thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having us, Mike. It was a pleasure.
And it's so important to have more dads doing this. So thank you. Thank you.
And happy birthday to your kids this week.
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Thank you for all your work. Bye.